Welcome to our podcast. I am John, and you're listening to Unbelievable Truth. Let's delve in.
All right, so today, we're really going deep. Bonnie and Clyde, beyond the Hollywood glam, right?
Right.
What was their life actually like? And the crime spree, everyone talks about the crime spree, but forget the big banks, right?
Yeah.
We're talking like gas stations.
Small potatoes.
Yeah. Small potatoes, really? Like $5 hauls? What is that?
It's fascinating, though, when you think about it.
Yeah.
It really speaks to the context, the historical context.
Of course.
I mean, this is the Depression,
Right?
their choices,
Yeah.
everything they did, but also how people saw them.
Yeah. How is that possible? I mean, you're idolizing a couple who's basically, robbing mom and pop places.
Right.
So what does that tell us about, like, the law, how people viewed the law back then?
Yeah, it makes you wonder. Were they like Robin Hood figures in the public eye?
Right.
It's complicated, though.
It's got to be.
It's more nuanced than that.
Okay.
Sure, some people probably romanticize them,
Yeah.
right? This whole rebellion thing, the system failed them.
Yeah, yeah.
But let's not forget, they were brutal.
Right.
People got hurt. Innocent people.
Just trying to get by, just like them, right?
Exactly.
So, okay, yeah, it's easy to get caught up in the legend, right?
It is.
But let's talk about Bonnie specifically for a second, because we've got her poetry.
Right.
So we get this sort of unique view into her mind.
Yeah, her poems are really a window into her world. And it wasn't all gun-toting outlaw, you know.
Great.
There's one, it's called The Trail's End. She gave it to her mother just weeks before.
Oh, wow. Talk about foreshadowing.
Right.
So was it like predicting what was coming, or was it more, about their life on the run, the emotions and all that?
The Trail's End is definitely eerie knowing when it was written.
For sure.
But most of her poems, they're about love and loss, longing.
Really?
Yeah, you get this glimpse of the woman behind the headlines, someone dealing with what she'd done, the consequences.
It's a side you don't hear about much. And then there's this whole other thing. This really complicates the Bonnie and Clyde love story.
Mm-hmm.
She died wearing a wedding ring.
Really?
Yeah. And it wasn't Clyde's. So what's that about? I mean, what does that tell us about them as a couple, especially compared to how, the media painted them?
It definitely throws a wrench in the Hollywood romance, that's for sure.
Yeah, it does.
She married young, you see, 16. Her sweetheart from high school, this guy Roy Thornton.
Okay.
Lasted about a minute, the marriage.
Oh, okay.
He ended up in prison. She never saw him again.
Wow.
But get this, even with Clyde living that life, she was technically still married to Thornton. Never got divorced.
So she's out there, this infamous outlaw, but on paper, someone else's wife. It's kind of wild when you think about it. What does that say about their relationship, really? Like what they promised each other or didn't?
It's a really good question. And, as much as Bonnie's story is about emotions, right? Clyde's past, that's a different kind of darkness. You familiar with the whole toe chopping incident?
Wait, what? Like he chopped off his toes?
Yeah.
Okay, now that's not in the movies. Why would someone...
Prison will do that to you.
I guess so.
He was doing time 14 years for robbery. Easton Prison Farm in Texas.
Brutal place.
The worst. Backbreaking work, brutal punishments.
So
He wanted a transfer. Desperately. Thought this might do it.
Oh my God.
Took an axe, chopped off his big toe, part of another one.
So self-mutilation to escape that life. That's intense. Just shows you how desperate he was, how bad that system was back then.
It does. I mean, that's a desperate act. And violent.
And this was all before Bonnie. Makes you wonder how much it shaped him,
Absolutely. And it gets even more complicated. He tried to join the Navy once. Got rejected.
Wow.
What if he'd gotten in? Would it have changed everything?
Right. It's those moments, those choices when you feel like there's no other way. Easy to judge looking back, but they were both products of their environment, weren't they?
It's no doubt. Shaped by forces beyond their control.
And then, of course, you have the media. Can't forget about them.
Oh, the newspapers. Huge influence back then. Shaped how the public saw Bonnie and Clyde.
Yeah, and it wasn't always pretty, was it?
Not at all.
So they're already shaping their image, even before the crime spree really kicks off.
Yeah, you got to consider the newspapers back then, especially with the Depression going on. They needed stories, something to get people reading.
And Bonnie and Clyde were it.
Young, daring, thumbing their noses at authority. It was perfect.
But it wasn't just the papers making stuff up, was it? It's like Bonnie and Clyde knew how to work it.
Oh, absolutely.
Those photos, posing with guns, the car, it's like, what would you call it? Early gangster chic.
Exactly. They knew what they were doing, creating a legend. And the media, they ate it up. Plus, don't forget, Bonnie's poems are going around too.
Right, right. Adding to the whole mystique.
Romance, intrigue, it had it all.
It's kind of creepy, though, how they influenced style even back then.
It's interesting, isn't it?
To this image, this romantic image, did it overshadow what they actually did? The crimes.
That's the big question, right? You got to remember, people were desperate, looking for escape, something to believe in.
And Bonnie and Clyde were it, for a while at least.
They were a distraction. And the media played into it, downplaying the violence, focusing on the exciting stuff.
Guess some things never change. Blurred lines between news and entertainment, even back then.
For sure. And then, well, their ending was just as big, just as public.
Talk about going out with a bang.
Gunned down in 34, ambush. It was over just like that.
And even in death, the spectacle continued. Think about it, their death car, the one with all the bullet holes. You'd figure museum, right?
You'd think so, wouldn't you?
But no. Casino.
Of all things, it's a strange story. After the ambush, this sheriff in Louisiana, part of the posse that got them, he claimed the Ford V8.
So like a trophy. That's dark.
In a way.
Yeah.
But a judge said, nope, got to go back to the owner. Some woman in Kansas, she reported it stolen by, you guessed it, Bonnie and Clyde.
Imagine that. Getting your stolen car back after all that. Bullet holes and all.
Can you imagine the stories that car could tell? But hold on, it gets weirder. It was sold, ended up in a traveling show.
No way.
Along with, get this, the mothers of Bonnie and Clyde.
Serious?
It's messed up, isn't it? This fascination, this need to profit off of them even after death.
Makes you think. On the one hand, it's their story, their legend. But on the other hand...
Exploitation. Plain and simple. And it's not like it ended there.
What do you mean?
They weren't even buried together. Bonnie's mother, she wanted nothing to do with Clyde, even in death.
Right, right. Talk about a reality check.
It puts a damper on the undying love narrative, doesn't it?
Big time. So no poetic ending, just, what, two separate graves?
Pretty much. Bonnie's mother made sure of it. The end of a love story, or at least that's how it goes down in history.
It reminds you, real life, it doesn't care about a good story, even for people who seem to write their own.
No kidding.
But it didn't end with the burials, did it? Wasn't there something about people like souvenir hunters at the ambush site?
Yeah, sadly. It's a grim reminder that fame, even infamy, has a dark side.
What do you mean?
People were trying to cut off pieces of their bodies.
You're kidding.
I wish I was. It's like this morbid need to grab a hold of something shocking, something notorious.
That's just ghoulish. It's just disturbing, honestly. It's easy to get caught up in the legend, but at the end of the day, you know, real people died.
It's that dark side of fame, isn't it? Even infamy.
Yeah, and this need to own a piece of it, literally. A piece of clothing, a lock of hair, like, it means something.
It's like they're trying to capture a piece of the story for themselves.
I guess. It's still pretty messed up. So does all this morbid stuff, does it cheapen their story? Or is it just, like you said, another layer to this whole messed up legacy?
I don't know. It makes you think, though, why are we still so fascinated? Why are Bonnie and Clyde still a thing after all this time?
Right. It's not like they were, you know, heroes or anything.
No, not at all.
Maybe it's that whole outlaw thing, living outside the rules, even if it's just a story.
It's romantic, in a way. Rebellion, challenging authority.
Yeah.
Especially back then, the Depression, people were desperate for something to believe in.
Yeah, good point. Bonnie and Clyde, they were a product of their times, weren't they?
Absolutely. But we can't forget, they did some terrible things.
Right. It's like we can be fascinated without, you know, approving. There's a difference.
Exactly. It's complicated. Their story is, well, it's a story about image and fame and how those things can get twisted, how infamy can become, well, celebrity.
That's a good way to put it. We've talked about their crimes, the love story, how the media made them icons. But I think we've also shown that they were real people.
Law people.
Yeah, for sure. But still human beings.
And that's history, isn't it? It's full of surprises, things that make you think twice about what you thought you knew.
Totally. Well, on that note, until next time, keep digging, keep asking questions, and we'll see you on our next deep dive.